At the beginning of the story, we are introduced to a man named Michael Duffield, or Duffy, who want to enter a bar. When he was inside, Duffy had seen some bad man who was playing poker, and Duffy also planned to follow him. Here Duffy, who has no money. He even pawned his watch to be able to play with them. After playing a few games, Duffy could beat them, which made the boss of the bad men angry. And there was a fight. Duffy was able to defeat them quite easily, and the fight was seen by a recently released prisoner named Max Bomer. After that, Duffy stayed at a nearby motel, because it was known Duffy didn't have a place to live, and he often moved around the city. Then it was finally revealed that Duffy used to be a Special Forces Marine with the rank of Major, who 7 years ago he lost many of his comrades on the battlefield of Afghanistan. In the war incident, only 2 people survived, that are Duffy himself and a colleague named Don Richter. This is the person. The next morning, Duffy was approached by Max, the man from last night who saw Duffy fighting in the bar. At first, Duffy was reluctant to talk to Max, but Max continued to explain that he had something that could be profitable for Duffy. Max was even willing to treat Duffy to breakfast while telling his purposes. Intrigued by this, Duffy finally agreed to be invited by Max to talk over breakfast. Here Max said that last night when Duffy beat up the bad men in the bar, he was also there. Max saw that Duffy was a tough guy who had great martial arts skills. That's why Max wanted to invite Duffy to use his fighting talent in order to make a lot of money. Duffy refused at first because he didn't trust Max at all. However, Max repeatedly assured Duffy that he couldn't lie to him, and Max was even ready to show Duffy what he meant. Long story short, Max took Duffy to the place he was talking about, and apparently it was a street fight. Then a man in a hat was shown, who was the operator of the fight, named Fosco. The operator was seen to match 2 fighters, and the action of the fight took place. After the first fight is over, the operator challenges everyone there to a fight with a big man, who is the operator's champion. Then the operator challenged Duffy, because he knew Duffy was invited by Max there for a fight. But unfortunately, Duffy refused, after he knew that he would only be used and matched by Max. Until when Duffy wanted to leave, everyone there bullied Duffy by calling him a coward. In the end, Duffy accepted the challenge, and there was a fight between Duffy and the big man. However, in just a matter of seconds, that Duffy was able to defeat the big man who was the operator's champion. After Max got the bet money from the operator, they immediately dispersed because they heard the sound of police sirens. On the way, Max asked Duffy if he had a house or a place to live. Duffy replied no. So Max immediately planned to accommodate Duffy at his sister's house. Then Max also didn't forget to share the money he had gotten from the operator to Duffy. Long story short, Duffy and Max finally arrived at Max's sister's house. However, Max's sister was seen there, who was kicking out her boyfriend because he was always causing trouble. Until finally, Duffy also beat up the boyfriend of Max's younger sister. This is Max's younger sister named Rachel, and Rachel is a one-child widow. The next day, showing Max who was meeting a mafia boss. It was known that Max had quite a lot of debt to the mafia boss, and he came there to repay his debt. Then the mafia boss asked where Max had been all this time, and Max replied that he had just been released from prison a few days ago. Then the mafia boss said that the interest on Max's debt would continue to increase if Max didn't pay it off in 1 week. Max replied how he could pay the debt in the ring match because he had just found a new fighter. The mafia boss was very happy to hear that, because all this time, the mafia boss had 2 tough fighters who couldn't be defeated. On the other side, Duffy was seen cleaning up Rachel's house. Then soon Rachel and Hannah, her daughter, came over, and they were amazed by Duffy's good behavior. Here Rachel and her daughter immediately thanked Duffy, who was willing to clean up their house. Later that evening, when Duffy, Rachel, and her daughter finished eating, they saw Max, who had just arrived home. Here Max looked very happy, because Duffy seemed to feel at home in Rachel's house. Then Max asked Rachel and her daughter to go to another room for a while, because Max wanted to discuss something alone with Duffy. Then Max was honest with Duffy that he had a debt to a mafia boss, and the debt would certainly not be full paid off if it was just paid in installments. For that reason, Max asked Duffy to fight once again so that the debt could be paid off, and they could also get money, Duffy, who felt sorry for Max, agreed to the invitation. The scene moves to the mafia boss, who is interrogating someone named Stan Lazar. It is known that Stan is Rachel's boyfriend, who at that time was kicked off by Rachel from her house and had received a beating from Duffy. It turns out that Stan is one of the mafia boss's men, who has stolen and embezzled all the group's money. At the same time, a blonde woman, who was a corrupt police chief named Ellen Ridgway, arrived. Here, the police chief asked where the savings money that Stan had stolen was. Stan replied that he had hidden all the money at his girlfriend's house, who was none other than Rachel. Upon knowing this, the chief, without hesitation, finished Stan off. Later, the chief asks the mafia boss to find out who Stan's girlfriend really is. The next night, Max and Duffy came to the fighting area to compete. It was seen that a female fight was taking place, which was watched by the corrupt police chief. After the first match was over, it was now Duffy's turn to compete against the mafia boss's men. The operator, who was the leader of the match, reminded Duffy that Rome mafia bossman wasn't a random person who could be underestimated. Then the fight happened. In just a matter of seconds, it turned out that Duffy easily overthrew his opponent. Then, when Duffy and Max want to leave, they were stopped by the mafia boss, who wanted to invite Duffy to compete again. And this time his opponent was the mafia boss right-hand man. But Max, who already understood the greatness of the right hand, refused the challenge because the most important thing now was that his debt was paid off, until the mafia boss said that he was willing to pay 3 times if Duffy was able to defeat his right hand. Hearing that, Duffy was willing to fight again if the mafia boss was willing to pay 5 times if he won. Without hesitation, the mafia boss agreed to the deal. Long story short, Duffy and the right-hand man had a match. At first, Duffy was so overwhelmed against the right-hand man, because until that time, the right-hand man had never been defeated. But in one time, Duffy remembered his past memories in Afghanistan. After the angry of the past memory, Duffy instantly became brutal. In the end, Duffy could win the fight. In fact, he almost finished off the right hand. At home, Duffy and Max are so happy, because now they have a lot of money. Here Max also thanked God for bringing him together with Duffy. If Max had never met Duffy, he would have been in debt and killed by the mafia boss. The next day, the mafia boss called the corrupt police chief to tell her that he had just gotten info of Stan's girlfriend's house. It was discovered that Stan was the one who was killed last night because Stan had embezzled their money. To make a long story short, the corrupt police chief and her staff went to Rachel's house under the pretense of looking for Stan. Here Rachel said that she and Stan had been separated for a long time, and she had no idea where Stan was now. But the corrupt police still forced their way in to search Rachel's house, looking for the money that Stan had embezzled. After ransacking the entire house, they didn't find the money. The police chief then said that Rachel had to find the money within a week, otherwise Rachel and her daughter would be doomed. Later that evening, Max and Duffy were seen returning home. Here, they were both shocked to find out that Rachel's house had just been searched by the corrupt police this afternoon. Then Rachel explained that they were looking for money hidden by Stan, her ex-boyfriend. Rachel didn't know about the money at all. Max, who heard this, immediately knew that the corrupt police must be the police who had been working with the mafia boss. Max then told Rachel and her daughter to close the door, while he and Duffy would go to the mafia boss place right now. Long story short, Duffy and Max went to the mafia boss, and Max asked why they were bothering Max's sister. The mafia boss replied that it wasn't his doing, but the actions of a bigger group than him, that is the corrupt police. Even the mafia boss himself didn't dare to do anything to them. Then the mafia boss explained that Stan, Rachel's ex-boyfriend, had confessed that the money he had embezzled was in the Rachel's house, Max's sister. Therefore, Rachel is now in danger, because if the money is not returned, then Rachel and her daughter will definitely be killed by the corrupt police, unless Max takes responsibility. After that, Max and Duffy decided to go home. But when outside, they accidentally bumped into the corrupt police chief and his deputy who were so fierce. While in the car, Max seemed confused about how he would pay off Stan's debt. But if he doesn't, then Rachel and her daughter will definitely become victims. Hearing this, Duffy said that he was ready to fight again, as long as Rachel and her daughter could be saved. A few hours later, seen Duffy brooding in front of Rachel's house. Then shortly after, Duffy was approached by Rachel, and Rachel asked why Duffy looked never slept. Duffy replied that when he closes his eyes, he always remembers his comrades in the military. Duffy told that all his comrades had died, and only 2 people survive, that was Duffy himself and a man named Don Richter. On the other hand, Max was meeting with the operator, so that the operator would make a big match for Duffy in order to get a lot of money. Max plans to pay off Stan's debt so that Rachel, his sister, won't be harassed by the corrupt police anymore. Hearing this, the operator was ready to help, as long as he was given a 30% commission. The next morning, the operator went to the mafia boss to tell him that Max wanted a big match. The operator also tried to lobby the mafia boss. If the mafia boss wanted revenge for his defeat yesterday, then this was the right time to do it. Hearing that, the mafia boss agreed, and later that night there would be a big match. Long story short, the night came. Max, who brought Duffy, came there to do the fight. It is known that the fight this time was attended by rich people who were ready to bet on their fighters. Meanwhile, the mastermind of this big fight is none other than the mafia boss and the corrupt police chief. They are sure this time Duffy will lose against their champion. Before the fight began, the chief said that if his hero lost against Duffy, the mafia boss would have to bear all the losses. Hearing this, the mafia boss refused, even saying that he had all the evidence of the chief's crimes. If the evidence is spread to the media, then it is certain that the corrupt police chief and his staff will be immediately smeared. The scene moved to Rachel, who wanted to take out the trash next to the house. But here Rachel saw a hole near her trash can, which turned out to be a bag of money hidden by Stan. Rachel then brought the money inside, and revealed the fact that the one who hid the money was Rachel's own daughter. Rachel's daughter immediately apologized and explained that she did it because she was upset with Stan, who was always rude to her mother. The scene returns to Duffy, who is told by the operator that Duffy's opponent is now a tough policeman. Therefore, the operator asked Duffy to win this match, because he had placed a $5 million bet on Duffy. Then the fight began. In the fight, it turned out that Duffy could easily defeat his opponent, who was a policeman. Then when his opponent was examined, it turned out that his opponent had died in the fight earlier. As a result, everything became chaotic, until Duffy and also the operator decided to run away immediately. On the way, Max calls Rachel to get her and her daughter ready, because they have to get out of this city as soon as possible. Here, Rachel also tells him that the money that the police were looking for yesterday has been found. But Max replied that it was too late and they had to leave immediately. Long story short, Max and Duffy arrived home and they immediately asked Rachel and her daughter to get into the car. But at the same time, they were suddenly attacked by corrupt police. In this incident, Rachel's daughter was shot and Max immediately called for an ambulance. After the ambulance came to take Rachel and her daughter to the hospital here, Duffy said that the 2 of them had to solve this problem right now. Then Duffy takes Max somewhere to meet his friend. The scene shifted to the operator, who wanted to run away with all his bet money. But when he wanted to head to the car, suddenly someone attacked and shot him. It turned out to be the corrupt deputy police chief, who was sent to collect the bet money. On the other hand, Max and Duffy meet Don Richter, who was Duffy's partner in the military. Here Duffy says that he needs some weapons, because tonight he will also fight against the corrupt police. Hearing this, Don Richter told them both to relax for a moment, because the weapons were already in his car. Then Don Richter told Max that Duffy had saved his life several times on the battlefield. After that, Don Richter took them to his car, which contained a lot of weapons. Here Don Richter asks Duffy to be joined and reinforce, as he hasn't done any armed action in a long time. Duffy initially refused because he didn't want to involve Don Richter, but Don Richter insisted, considering that he had a lot of life to Duffy. Long story short, Duffy, Max, and Don Richter went to the mafia boss's places to look for the corrupt policies. The mob boss said that the group of corrupt policies was also after him, and they should all be on their guard. Sure enough, at the same time, the corrupt policies arrived and surrounded the place, and there was a battle. The corrupt police chief's men were leveled by Don Richter, Max, and Duffy. At one point, the mafia boss was cornered by the police chief, so without hesitation, he finished him off. Then the police chief also could corner Max, and asked Duffy to surrender before he finished Max. In the end, Duffy surrendered to the chief, but without realizing it, Max could shoot the corrupt police chief. After everything was done, Duffy realized that his best friend, Don Richter, was now dying. Here, Duffy tries to strengthen and hold Don Richter, but unfortunately Don Richter must also die. The next day shows Max visiting the hospital. It appears that Rachel's daughter is now awake, and he will be allowed to go home. In short, Rachel is home, and she is reading a letter from Duffy. In the letter, Duffy thanked Rachel for accommodating him at Rachel's house. As for the money found in the trash can, Duffy told Rachel to make the best use of it. Duffy also promised that once things settled down, he would return to Rachel's house and marry her. With that indirect propose, the movie ended.